Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another Breakfast with Blaha. And today I'm having, you guys guessed it, steak, brown rice, broccoli. Breakfast of champions. All right, talk a little bit about training to failure. And it's funny because this is something that largely in the strength world, strength and conditioning world, everyone understands this. It's known. No one would even debate this, but because the fitness world on YouTube has a very large overlap with the bodybuilding world, and incidentally, you got to wonder why so many bodybuilders get hurt who don't even lift that heavy. I mean, seriously, the amount of injuries these guys have relative to what they lift shouldn't even be happening. And I think that the training to failure is part of it. It's a big part of it. And before I go into some of the details of this, many people will say, well, if what you're saying is true, they shouldn't even be as big as they are. They shouldn't be getting results. And it's not necessarily true. Keeping in mind, most serious bodybuilders are genetically gifted and they're on lots of drugs. And they're training hard. Well, that combination is going to hit you big, even if you're doing things in a way that's suboptimal. In other words, that can bridge the gap. Anabolics gives you a margin for error. It gives you a massive margin for error, particularly in hypertrophy. In other words, nearly optimal muscle growth can be achieved without hitting optimal. Right? It gives you a much larger target. You can make more mistakes and still get big. Again, as long as sufficient training stimulus is there. Right? I mean, and there is that line, nothing works unless you do. Degree of truth of that, irrespective of the studies we have on that. Something can be said for that fact. Look, they're at least training hard. And they're genetically gifted. And they're on lots of stuff. But the point is, their world has this, we got to train to failure. It's where we get the last muscle fibers. But that's just not true. It's actually not based on reality. It's not based on studies on advanced lifters. There's never been found to be a hypertrophy benefit to training to failure. Leaving 1 to 2 reps in the tank, some cases 3, produces just as much muscle growth. This is when it's looked at in the lab and they measure it over several months of training. All right, the growth is the same. And here's the thing. If you're not training to failure, we're getting similar muscle growth. And we come back over to that whole training volume versus recovery. You recover easier. If you're recovering easier, guess what? You can do more. If you do more, you get more training stimulus. Because it's a question of how much stimulus can we generate versus what can we recover from. And people will say, well, you're just telling people not to train hard. Well, look at all of my back and legs. Right? I may not have the best arms in the world, the best pecs as a strength athlete. But my back is ridiculous, and bodybuilders be mine. My leg development is up there. Look at what I squat and deadlift. Now, you guys think I don't train my back and legs hard? Yet watch what I do. You see me train to failure? You guys ever see me train to failure on leg exercises? Back exercises? In other words, squats, deadlift, rows, glute ham raises, belt squats, so on and so forth. You don't see me training to failure. That those muscles are monstrously big and strong. I train them hard. There's a difference. People have this idea that training to failure means that you're training hard. Not really. In fact, you're just crapping out and not even doing that much work too early. In other words, coming in and doing 5 really high quality sets on an exercise not to failure on a big movement is a lot more work than going to failure your first 3 sets, losing performance, and just not being able to do anything. In fact, you're not training hard after a couple sets, you don't have anything left. But let's come over to that other point about overuse. What causes injuries? Is it bad form? What is it? Not really. You can compensate for bad form. Your body will build connective tissue and support around bad form. Actually, bad form doesn't get you hurt that often. That's just true. Unless it is truly horrendous. And even then, sometimes guys get away with it for years. Like if you're flopping and jerking, okay. Bad form's a little different when we're talking about elbow bend on a deadlift, for example. Jerking without pulling slack out of the bottom of a deadlift. Okay, that's a little different. But we can come back to that overuse point too, can't we? If you're training those deadlifts to failure, that you're going to exacerbate that problem. And there's what we're looking at. All right, big exercises don't need to be anywhere near failure to generate very large amounts of hypertrophy, oftentimes through multiple muscles. But when we start reaching muscle failure, that's when bad form gets even worse. That's when we start making mistakes. Well, if we know that overuse, and again, going to failure often, one of the things that causes overuse is the number one contributor to injuries. Experts agree on this. Training to failure creates more overuse because what ends up happening, our form degrades on big multi-joint exercises the closer we get to failure. We don't even have to reach failure for form to degrade. It's another reason it's good to stop short. Oftentimes 1 rep before failure on a big movement, our form looks like crap. Well, if we're getting to all that overuse because we're accumulating a lot of overuse on the big movements by going to failure, and then we're all the time having 1 to 2 reps near the end that look terrible and put us into really bad positions to where we're looser, we're not braced, that combination is a recipe for disaster. This is how we get hurt. All because a person thinks, oh, this is what training hard means. That's not what training hard means. Following good programming with lots of effective volume consistently, that is training hard. That's what training hard should mean. Not did I go to failure, did I do some forced reps, did I scream and yell while I do it. Nothing, that's not what training hard means. That's training stupid. It's training stupid. And there's a big difference between the two. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.